Welcome into our Colliers cafe, and very welcome to Stina and Bobby and Anne. It's a very nice day because we launched today our retail roller coaster report, and it's all about where we are standing now in our retail landscape and where we're going to. We had a good start this morning with yoga on the beach, and I think the retail market is slightly coming to a yoga situation. But we're not there yet. So we want to talk about a few topics from our report. The strong core shopping center assets. We still think it is the strong core in our landscape. Repositioning on locations that are not performing well. The e-commerce, the impact of e-commerce. I want to ask Anne something about that. High streets, are they dead, Bobby? Bobby will give you the answer. Or is it long live the high streets? We don't know. The impact of F&B, which I think is really taking an enormous market share in the retail space, and the role of the government. So to start, Stina, do you think the shopping centers' assets are still a strong core, or you doubt it?
I think for my market, which is the Nordics, it's absolutely a strong core. 35% of all commerce happens in the shopping centers in Norway. And this, I think, is partly due to the climate. It's horrible climate in the Nordics. And it's also due to the road net. It takes longer time to get to places. So it's absolutely important. We have over 500 shopping centers in Norway. And it's the country in Europe with the highest shopping center density per capita. So it is important, and it will remain important.
And how do you see that in the States? The same?
So the shopping center, the regional mall sector of the United States has been bifurcating for many years now, where you have the strong centers, the A centers that maybe are generating more than $500 a foot per square foot per year. And they are doing very well, and the landlords are continuing to invest in those. We maybe have 200 or so of those centers in the U.S. that are in that place. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we might have as many as 25 or 30% of all of the centers in the U.S. that are C or D centers. They are struggling. They have a vacant anchor. And we say in the U.S. we're not over retail, we are under demolished, which relates to what you will be talking about in a few minutes about how you reposition parts of shopping centers or all of shopping centers whose retail pieces, for whatever reason, are no longer working as well as they should.
Exactly, and that's my next question is about what do we do with assets that are not performing well anymore. We see it in Holland, a lot of shopping centers on wrong locations, repositioning to residential or hotels or otherwise. So I give it back to you immediately. So what do you think about it?
So what's been happening in the U.S. is most of the biggest vacancies in shopping stores are the large department stores, JCPenney, Sears, that are all just, they have too many stores, they haven't been able to differentiate themselves. In most cases, the landlords know that closure, that vacancy is coming, so they have a year, 2 years, 3 years to prepare. Leisure, entertainment is always a good first option, but sometimes the space is too big. You have to try to stack multiple uses. So now they're getting creative. They're partnering with hotels because you already have the parking for a hotel. They're even doing more apartments, multifamily, to the extent that you can get the cities to work with you on changing zoning. But in general, the municipalities want to work with you because the last thing they want is a vacant box that generates no tax revenue. But it still takes a long time because the government can make things challenging in every country.
Just to jump in there, in the UK market, we're seeing a huge kind of change at the moment through the way the department stores are running, and even in some of the big shopping streets like Oxford Street, when BHS vacated 3 years ago, that space has now been repurposed into ground floor shop, first floor entertainment, crazy golf section, and then soon to open is this new food hall, which is a new way that the F&B market, I think, has taken over some of the space that we'll maybe touch upon a bit later.
What we also see, of course, the role of e-commerce. E-commerce is still going like this, but we showed in the report that probably in 2025 it's at the stop. But we also see these e-commerce entrepreneurs opening physical stores. Like in Holland, we have Coolblue, but Amazon probably will be one of the biggest physical retailers within 10 years. Do you agree on that, or who wants?
Yes, so Amazon, all of you know, is doing very well in the U.S., but with their purchase of the grocery store of Whole Foods, they have really enhanced their distribution network throughout the United States. Interestingly, we heard last year that Amazon and Whole Foods were having some challenges because Whole Foods is very organic. It's all natural products, biologic product that you would, want to make yourself healthy. And Amazon does a huge business wanting to sell soda, carbonated beverages, and how you figure out the disconnect between health. I mean, it wasn't always easy for them. They're still working through the integration, but one of Amazon's big challenges right now in the U.S. is fulfillment, because there are only so many UPS trucks or postal trucks, and so they're setting up these click and collect distribution centers and trying to find places where the best places are to get people to pick up their goods, because they're even changing the design of some apartment buildings where young people live, because the mail room in an apartment building used to only have, one person had a little mail slot, and now they need whole rooms in these new multifamily projects for all these Amazon packages that are coming in, which changes how you think about design as well. So,
Stine, what is the trend in Norway about the e-commerce?
Well, e-commerce is actually growing quite rapidly in Norway. Now it has about 4 to 5% of the total commerce, so it's not so high compared to the other countries. The growth in 2017 was 15, 16%, and now the last 6 months the growth has been 14%. So in the Nordics it's growing. But we also see a lot of onliners going offline and opening physical stores. And what many of them say, which is quite interesting, is that they don't necessarily need to make money on the stores. As long as they go break even, it's fine, because they take it off the marketing budgets. So they open the stores as a marketing, not stunt. Stunt is wrong to say, but a marketing tool. So that's a part of their strategy. And they hope that opening physical stores will boost their online sales. And I think this is something we will see more and more going forward.
Probably they will save the high streets or not. I see it in the Kalverstraat in Amsterdam. There is vacancy now. There are signings on the stores for rent. Bobby, are the high streets dead, or do we see new high streets coming up?
I don't think the high street is dead. I think that what we're seeing at the moment is a huge change in the way that people shop. And actually, the clever retailers are adapting to that. They're creating a bit more of an experience when you go shopping. Something that you can't get online. It isn't necessarily price driven. So actually, while it is changing very quickly, it's actually a very exciting time, and it's a great opportunity for new retailers, whether they're existing online or new entrants to the market, that can come in and actually take advantage of this and get some great retail spaces and some fantastic pitches.
What we see in Holland and throughout Europe is that the food and beverage sector is growing fastly. After the crisis, it was about 8% in the high streets, and now we are almost 20%, coming probably up to 30%. Is it the same in the United States, Anne?
very much so. I work in San Francisco, which is a very food and restaurant driven city. And I can say that we always have retailers, as we say, kicking the tires, looking for space. They're not just restaurateurs, but they're apparel as well. I'd say probably 2/3 of the calls that I have gotten in the past year have been from F&B operators. They are the ones who are looking to expand. They just have to make the economics work in the spaces they are in because of high labor cost and high cost of product as well. Food prices are going up as well.
Stine, how is that for the Nordic countries?
In the Nordics, it's also growing rapidly, especially in the shopping centers. We see not a death of shopping centers, but actually the shopping center developers gathering their machines and really redeveloping and increasing, and then food and beverage is taking a huge part. So traditionally, the food and beverage sector has been between 2 to 5%, and now it's up to 20, 25. So that's a huge percentage increase. And we see also the same happening in high streets, clustering of food and beverage concepts, and also not just food and beverage, but concepts that do food and beverage and experience. So you do bowling courses and shuffleboards and darts. Yeah.
We're seeing very similar in the UK as well. And another sector that is taking over some of this retail space that's becoming vacant is the gyms. So health and fitness is a huge part. Not necessarily huge 10, 15,000 square feet spaces, but boutique class gyms where there's spinning or running or boxing. And these are seen as being maybe a little bit more easy for a building to adapt into because they don't have the same kitchens and the same power requirements. So the rents that these guys are paying is increasing, and they're taking over a lot of space at the moment.
You're telling something about the rents, because maybe we can conclude is F&B taking over retail, but they're never going to pay the prices the traditional fashion retailer are paying. So what will that do with the high streets and the assets?
Well, I think there's a great opportunity, as I mentioned before, for some landlords who are kind of adapting their rental models and their business plans. We're involved in a project at the moment in Camden where leases are going to be very short, probably 1 to 3 years long. They are going to be turnover only based, and I think that is an element that will come into the market increasingly to kind of help with retailers' costs when they're fitting out spaces and help to get the rents from more of a business partner with the occupier than just the landlord taking the rent.
We see also the same, that turnover rent is more and more popular. But what's also then interesting to see is how will the landlords do the valuation of their buildings in the end? Because if you don't have the minimum rents, if you have solely turnover rents, I'm curious to just see how the banks will adjust to this in the future. But that's another topic.
And then, of course, we have the government. Are they helpful? Or are they not? Because in Holland, I see in Amsterdam, it's really a disaster now. It's like these souvenir shops, they're not allowed to open anymore. But even a normal fish store where you can buy a bread and a fish is not allowed anymore. How do you see the role of the government?
Well, it's definitely living on the west coast of the U.S. The government is very involved, and it's challenging from us not only for a taxation perspective, but also from a timing perspective as far as how long it takes to get permits for a building. And you take delays in getting all your government approvals with the rise in construction cost, that where by the time you get an approval for a project you started 1.5 years or 2 years ago, whether it's retail or multifamily or office, the project is too expensive for you to build. So you have to go out and rejigger the economics of how you're going to do it. So it keeps everybody on their toes. You have to be paying attention to the market and not be afraid to ask for advice from people who are in the market.
In the UK, there's two factors I think that the government have quite a big impact. The local property tax is very high for retailers when they take over space, and it was revalued about 3 or 4 years ago. And I think they need to look at a wholesale change of how they do that property taxation, and hopefully to include and make a bit more of an even playing field with those e-commerce specialists who are at the moment benefiting hugely from not having the same property taxes. But there's also the planning rules in the United Kingdom in terms of changing space from retail into F&B or leisure or residential. They are very strict and they are very slow to adapt to what is going on in the market. It makes it hard for landlords to be able to get their space filled when they want to.
In Norway, it's the same. I think the government has to do something and react more quickly. In high streets, we see that they're removing all the parking spaces in the city center. This is obviously affecting high street retail. You also have to do retail on the first floor of the stores, of the buildings. And with rents increasing, with lease rents decreasing and then rents from the bank increasing, that's not a good combo. This is obviously good for the shopping centers because they get the traffic over to their side. So I think the government has to move quickly.
Just to add to that a little bit as well, is that when the high streets in some places outside of London are struggling, it really takes a joint effort between not just the property owners but also the local governments and the local councils to make sure that they are working together to create the right retail environment and keep attracting people in, whether it's the parking or the planning, the property taxation.
Okay, we are going to finish a little bit. When you read this report, what is your number one tip for the people listening here for the next 7 years? Your number one tip?
I would say to adjust to the fact that retail is changing and to focus on experience, because we hear so much about retail dying. I don't believe it at all, but I think boring retail is dying. So I think we need to focus on experiences and giving the customer something more than just goods for a decent price, because that's not what the consumer wants anymore.
I think it would be to take a proactive approach to your leasing structure. Don't just do a 10 or a 15-year lease because that's what's been done in the past. Try and include a bit of turnover or some flexibility and try and help the retailers or the occupiers with the cost of getting set up, because that is a huge barrier to entry for new brands.
I would echo what these guys said. It's all about being flexible. If you're modeling out for a 10-year lease, if you need to get financing, try to work with your lender and be flexible on the terms you have in there. I would also caution anyone who is doing development or redevelopment, if there are retail spaces in their scheme, to make sure that your building is built in a way where you can change the demising sizes of the spaces quickly, because retailers are taking smaller spaces. And one of the big challenges we have in San Francisco and elsewhere is we have all these huge retail spaces that cannot be cut down. And then we might have 5 retailers that want to fill them, but we can't put them in there because of the way the space has been configured. And if the space had been designed with an ability to do that, we would have 5 tenants in there paying something versus a building that sits empty.
Well, great guys. It was good to talk with you about the Rollercoaster report and your insights from your own country. So thank you very much, Stine, Bobby and Anne. And give it back to you.